Hi, welcome back to Design for Equitable Systems. Today we'll be talking about theories of change. What is it, and how can you utilize it as you work towards addressing systemic injustices in your communities? So some readings. The first one is the Millennial Impact Report. If you are a young person, some of the stuff in here is not new, but if you work with young people, it might be good to really empathize and understand the kind of challenges young people are facing and the ways that they're handling them. And the next reading is about systems level change, and it's really just to build on some of the systems level thinking techniques that we talked about earlier this week, and hopefully it'll help you out in your journey to be a systems level designer. So I'll do a brief review of systemic challenges, as a lot of the questions I'll be using today as we think about theories of change are building off of some of the things that we learned about in the first lecture. And so remember that constructing a system is a multi-level process. First, you have to ingrain it into our practices, the structural things that we often talk about, but then we also, again, have those individuals and cultures that uphold the power dynamics built by the system. And as we've shown in our earlier lecture, things like racism may be structurally built in, but the ways that we treat Black people and the ways that Blackness does not hold a lot of power in the West, and the mental models that we have that are anti-Black start to hold in these structural places and make us feel that, they're all kind of part of that racist system. And so this is really important to understand, is to really change this. Again, we have to be attacking every level of the pyramid in a systemic way. And I just always like to show the slide. It's always about understanding what each of these things is and how different tactics can address each of these changes. Especially important as you build a theory of change, which is really all about how do you take something that you care about, believe in a better future, and work your way to that. So again, we have the policies. These are the things that keep the system in place by politics on the company level, the practices, so the norms that we have, the resource flows, so the movings and shiftings of wealth. And then on the relational side, we see that the way we treat power and the way we connect and have relationships with others keeps certain systems in place. And finally, the mental models that we all have is on that individual and can be a transformational change if you change the mental models of the people who can then start to adjust the other levels of the system. So now that we're all refreshed, we'll try to dive into what is a theory of change. It definitely is something that you might not see in your normal textbook, and it's pulled from nonprofit leadership, but I've kind of tweaked it a little bit to be more focused on your individual journeys. And so, first off, to think about theories of change, we need to think about where we are right now. So young people, as we saw in the Millennial Impact Report, are changing the ways we think about impact. Young people are far more to look at causes than their institutions. So rather than donate to a specific nonprofit that they've heard about, they're very focused on issue areas. Like, I want to address menstrual inequity. I want to address hunger, the criminal justice system. These causes are what motivate young people more than the organizations that might be leading them, which shows why you kind of join this course thinking that, the institutions have held up this system, so I want to deconstruct them by doing my own work. Action has often become more than just volunteering. You are here today because you believe that you might have volunteered in your life, you might have donated in your life, but some of these systems are held in place and can't be shifted by just these actions. And 86% believe they could make a difference in the world, which is uplifting and really cool to think about, is that we are an empowered generation that believes that the future can be better, and thus we want to work to make it better. And so we want to use our voices and make the change we want to see. And so how can we do that in a meaningful way that addresses these systemic challenges and ensures that we are being responsible and sustainable in our work? And that's where theories of change came in. As we talked about last week, the systemic challenges really need a collective vision for a better future. And so your theory of change can act as that vision, your North Star, and an evolving plan to get you towards that change that you want to see in the world. And so it can be a nice uplifting activity that gets you set up for the design processes that we'll talk about later in this course. And so taking down a system, as we talked about, requires that collectivist thinking. Your theory of change is going to be a call to action that activates the people around you and starts to get them interested in the projects that you'll be leading and the interventions that you'll be addressing. You must understand those current realities to bring others along with you. As we talked about last week, the capacity building work that needs to be done to address systems really requires uplifting those that are closest to the problem and giving them the tools they need to address those problems. So without bringing them along, we often will just perpetuate the same injustices. So again, always be working on building capacity with your work, and your theory of change can be a part of that. So your do's and don'ts of crafting a theory of change. Do, you be ambitious. So it is a North Star. And so don't feel you have to hold yourself to a confined standard of what you think is possible, because many of changes in our lifetimes will likely not seem like they could have happened before they did. And so make sure that that is a part of your theory of change. Always get to the root of the problem. So problems are very complex. And as we saw with systems, they're multi-level and multifaceted. So if you can find origins of problems, figure out where do things come from, what are the things that you need to shift, that will help you build a strong theory of change. Understand your privilege. So we are all, if we are able to take this course, we probably are a bit privileged because right now people don't have internet access. And so thinking about the ways that that privilege shapes your worldview is very important for making sure that you're empowering those that need to be in the room. Make sure to be sharing your theory of change with others. This is an evolving document and should be something that you talk about when you pitch the things that you want to change in the world. And always be held accountable for your missteps. If you make something that, from learning from others, that is actually not what they need, it's something to be important to adjust and apologize and make sure that you're working on a sustainable solution. Your don'ts, don't keep it static. As I said before, this is an evolving document. So you should be constantly improving and constantly addressing things that you might have missed your first time around in crafting it. Make sure that the people that need to be there are there and that are directly impacted. And you, again, should not assert ultimate authority over the social issue. Even though you really care about it, you're not, the only one. And making sure that you have the values, you're valuing your partners and your stakeholders in this process as you work together to impact the systems that you want to change. So how do we build a theory of change? I'm going to show you this, but I'm going to break it down because right now it's a lot of text and a little overwhelming. But it is about a 5-step process that'll really help you to reflect deeply on some of these challenges that you want to address. So we're going to start kind of at the ultimate outcome. As I said, this is a North Star. So you are thinking about, what is the ultimate injustice? What will a better future look like if I'm successful? And how will people's lives change if I'm successful? This is kind of like your vision, and you're working towards it and you're passionate about it. And it really helps you to get focused and ready to think about these other levels, because you're constantly iterating and constantly working to get to that future that you imagine. So next, then you have to understand the current reality. You can't change something without knowing how it currently works in a deep way. So why is it inequitable? And what are the reasons that it's held in place? Again, thinking about that structural, the relational, and the individual constructs of a system, how do each of those levels sort of hold the injustice in place? And again, think about readiness and capacity. Who is in the space? Who is working? Who can I be partnering with? And how ready are they to talk about the injustice that I want to address? Next up, you have to think about who's going to be on your team and who will you work to give agency. And really thinking about, what are all the power dynamics at play? And how can I try to include those that have been traditionally marginalized in the spaces that I want to impact? So definitely think about some concepts. Right now, I'm not going into this today, but power mapping is a wonderful activity to do just that. Think about, again, what do people facing the injustice identify as needs? And finally, if you're not part of the community, how are your own biases influencing the change that you think they need? And how do you make sure that you are challenging those on a constant basis to make sure you're seeing the community authentically and not through the lens of the narratives that you've been told? Next up is how. So you know what you want to change, you know who needs to be involved, how will you do it? So think about some processes. So we talked about earlier this week some of those processes that people have used to impact systems. Maybe those work for you. Maybe there's another process that we can learn about and iterate on further in this course as we dive into the design process. How can we learn about what is working and not working? And how, again, are we empowering the people who are most directly impacted by the problem and making sure that throughout it all, we're acknowledging the history of injustice and working for healing? And finally, what are your points of accountability? If you're not accountable to things, you are bound to mess up and you're bound to make mistakes. So as long as you're consulting, where might I slip up and where might I need to address my slip-ups? These questions can really help you reflect on how I'm making sure that I'm consistently checking in and the people in the room need to be there. How am I creating those agencies so that people can address their own problems and help me to course correct rather than me always being in charge? And how can I create environments where it is truly safe to fail? So design talks about iterating, it talks about failing, but often communities have been failed so many times that they are tired of being failed by design. So making sure that you are creating a safe environment to test and learn is critical to the work that you want to do. So I'm going to share this, but it probably is going to be hard to read while we're on this slide deck, but please feel free to dive more deeper into it when I share my slides. But for me, I think about that most people don't have these tools to think about liberation and to think that there's a better future out there and they can address those systemic injustices. And this is because current realities, hold in white supremacist thinking that, the world is, changes slowly and we can't change certain things or just how it is. And so it's really trying to address the social good industrial complex to focus on systemic change and working, with young people to do that, and delivering those capacity building trainings and making sure that I'm constantly checking with the young people. I can hopefully get to a future where young people are working towards liberation and have the tools and the confidence they need to redesign the things that are unjust and make them more just. So again, dive deeper into this. It can be a consulting document for you as you work on your theory of change. So I'll also link an activity. So this activity will be available to you in the blog post where you can start to work on your own theory of change. If you feel like you're struggling with 4 and 5, don't worry. We can definitely consult on that, as well as I feel like throughout the design process, those sections will become more robust as we do our community analyses, iterative work, and testing. So some closing thoughts. Remember that a theory of change is evolving, constantly being tested and challenged. And it's just for you to help guide work towards a collective better future for the communities that you care about and for the issue areas that you want to deconstruct. So some next readings, we'll be talking next week about identity and how it impacts our lens when we're doing social change work. So definitely dive in. Some of these readings are a little spicy, but I think they'll really help set the tone for being more responsible and sustainable with our designs. Awesome. As always, email me at grace@designforequitablesystems.com if you have any questions, and I look forward to seeing you next week. So thanks.